What does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Hey everyone, just a quick announcement. We are very excited to be organizing Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023. Summer camp for mad people in the mountains of Northern California. Join us, support this vision. Check out madcamp.net and make sure to sign up for the mailing list for updates. Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023, madcamp.net.
All right. It's so weird for me to do the introduction to Madness Radio.
I know.
I've been listening on my headphones to you doing Madness Radio episodes for 10 years or something, So I'm very ingrained with the welcome to Madness Radio. This is your host, Will Hall. Today I'm interviewing blah, 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 blah.
I'm dying to hear how you're going to do it.
All right. Welcome to Madness Radio. I'm your co-host, Jax McNamara, and I'm here today with my fellow co-host, Will Hall, and we're going to be interviewing Cassidy Wilson.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's great to be back with you, Jax. Thanks for taking over the intro for the very first time. That's very, very exciting. And I'm really excited about introducing you, Cassie. Cassidy Wilson is a psychiatric survivor and University of Chicago undergraduate student with a double major in neuroscience and human rights. Her area of focus is on neuroscience and carcerality. And so welcome to Madness Radio, Cassidy Wilson.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we met each other at I guess it was the Mental Health Law Conference that recently happened, and we were on a panel about involuntary treatment. And I was just really struck by your story and your presentation, also your work with carcerality and the critique of neuroscience. And so I'm really glad we have you on the show today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I was excited to meet you at that conference.
Great. Well, how should we get started? Should you want to say more about how you kind of got to be on the panel and how we ended up having this interview? Yeah.
So how I ended up talking at that conference and being on this panel was because I had written a piece about an experience with an involuntary hospitalization and then asked my school newspaper to publish it. And part of why I had done this was, so the piece basically just tells the story of a involuntary hospitalization that happened to me in the summer of 2021, in June 2021.
I should just say we'll link to the article in the description for the show as well. People can check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. And I had written the article because I felt like there was really no conversation around this happening at my campus. So the article details basically I'd called student counseling because I was experiencing crisis. And then the campus police had come to my apartment. They had handcuffed me. And then I was taken and held in the ER for about 3 days, and then held on a psychiatric ward for about 3 days. And it was a horrible experience, and we can get more into that. But following it, people kept kind of being like, oh, I'm glad you got help, or are you better now, or things like that. And I was like, no. And then and also immediately before that hospitalization, I had started getting really into looking at the interdependence between abolition and disability justice, and sort of the way that the carceral nature of the prison industrial complex also extends to domains of mental health. Particularly, I had been interested in this because of thinking about previous experiences with psychiatric hospitalization that were not as bad as the one with that happened in summer 2021. That was my first time being taken by police, but it wasn't my first time with hospitalization. I'm really thinking about the way that it mirrors incarceration, the way that a like psychiatrist or someone can like really say like anything about you and justify your detainment, and anything you say gets dismissed because of what like the psychiatrist or whoever has said about you in the first place. It's kind of like this catch-22 of, if someone says like, oh, this person is crazy, any argument you make, either if you argue that you're not crazy or that being crazy doesn't make your voice less legitimate, will be dismissed through by virtue of the argument of, oh, like they're so crazy, how could they like know that? And the way that this can really be weaponized against like anyone, and also thinking about within the calls for abolition or defunding of the police, there was often a call of put more money into mental health. But as far as I had been seeing, I hadn't seen a lot of stuff that was examining the way that mental health is currently operating and the way that it might like serve as actually like a reproduction of that. So I started getting like really into like thinking about this and like reading about this more. I had also like one book that was like really impactful me was I had read, or well, it also had just come out, but the book Decarcerating Disability, and like started talking about this a lot. And then immediately after that, I had this happen, and I was like, oh wow, this is like a perfect example. And also just noticing the huge contrast between the dominant narrative around mental health care and what I experienced and what I know that others had experienced. And I was like, I can't like not say something about this. And in particular, it had been there was like this one conversation I had met someone who was an alumni of my college who had like graduated the previous year, and they were like talking to me, and they were saying like, oh, I'm gonna like go get a job at like psychiatric hospital. And I was like, oh, and then I was like curious. I was like, oh, what's that? Because I was like curious as to what like the other side of the narrative was, particularly for people who were doing this, because I feel like there's kind of like the thing of like this kind of thing of people are like doing their jobs and don't really think about it, but it's like, how do they not see this as harm? So I was really curious about it. I also have I say that I have a secret agent complex, which is like how I kind of like conceptualize kind of being in like a neuroscience program while also being a pathologized person. And sometimes like I'll be in classes and people will say stuff that I think is like pretty offensive and dehumanizing, sometimes about conditions that I have, and kind of this feeling of like, you are talking about me, but you don't know that you're talking about me. Also, I'm autistic, and I think a lot about like autistic masking and of like what it's like to sort of present in like a certain way, and sometimes feeling like an infiltrator in some ways, but also feeling like a double agent, being like in this institution who exacts these very like types of harms, but then also being like in an institution but not of it. But I conceptualize it as like a secret agent complex, which I also think is kind of fun. I like the genre of like secret agents.
Yeah, that's a really strong image, especially the fact that you're doing this research. It's like participatory observer field research, like in the thing that, which is actually, I think, one of the best kinds of science, is actually have the firsthand experience of something that you're studying while you're also working on understanding it.
For sure. Well, and then I think that's like interesting though, because I feel like neuroscience exacts a lot of like epistemic injustice in that way, in that very rarely the people conducting this type of research are people with like the lived identities of it. I think that happens for like a lot of reasons. Like I think for one is it can be very triggering to hear things talked about in this way, but then also the current construction of how like neuroscience pedagogy is kind of delegitimizing of voices. So then it can be really hard to openly say that you have one of these identities, because when you do, you risk invoking all of the stereotypes and conceptions that people have onto you, because it's much easier for people to dehumanize you to match their conception of what a person with whatever condition looks like, than to really like reconcile and examine like, why do I have this conception and why is it dehumanizing?
So help us with that term epistemic injustice. I know that's used a lot. Help us understand.
So epistemic injustice, so the field of epistemology is kind of like how the formation of knowledge happens. Epistemic is kind of related to knowledge. And then the injustice comes in when certain forms of knowledge or like ways of knowing are subjugated or delegitimized. So I think about particularly in the case of madness identities and the way that neuroscience and psychiatry kind of exact epistemic violence, both through like the direct damaging of people's like ability to speak on what they're saying, by saying like, oh, like if someone is crazy, they don't know what's going on, or like da 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 da, and then also all the ways that that has been used kind of historically as a cudgel against people fighting for their civil rights, and the way that has been used to like delegitimize voices or delegitimize people who are deviant from the status quo, but then also in how that also is kind of like very strategically constructed in the field and saying that like the scientist has the authority because they are smart and they are rational and they are all of these things, and sort of the way that there's this huge like power imbalance in the people, both the power imbalance but also the people who really know the most are given the least authority to speak on it.
So epistemic injustice is actually a broader realm of study or a broader concept, and the psychiatric position is one example of
yeah
it.
No, there's tons of epistemic injustice. Yes, but I was, because the place that I was in was like neuroscience, that was where I was noticing it. But yeah, you can see it all over in all sorts of domains in our society. And then also like too, that's part of like how epistemic injustice works, is making people think that something is like not there, or like that this way of knowing is not there, or not legitimate, or not like a legitimate way of knowing.
So this is a good moment to just add that epistemic injustice was first coined by Miranda Fricker, and Cassie learned about it from the Routledge Handbook of Epistemic Injustice.
But because I have this secret agent complex, I like, this person was saying to me like, oh, like I'm gonna get a job at like a like mental hospital, and I was like, oh, like what's that? Or like what do you do? And he was like, oh, well, you know, like you just gotta like check on the patients every 15 minutes, making sure they're not like talking to each other, like making friends. And I was like, oh, like why why do you want to make sure the patients aren't making friends? And he was like, oh, you know, like if you have one depressed person and then they go talk to another depressed person, they're just gonna like escalate each other, and that's gonna lead to suicides. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that that's what happened when two depressed people talk to each other. I would have thought that it would be like nice to have someone to talk to who has similar experiences to you. And he was like, yeah, like I know it's counterintuitive, but like this is what helps. And like throughout the conversation, he kept kind of saying like, I know it's counterintuitive, but this is what helps. Like this is like what our training says. And I felt like I was like in like, I didn't say this because I was just like, I was very curious as to what he said, and then kind of disturbed by what he said. But I was like, when you say, I know this is counterintuitive, but this is what helps, I'm like, that is you sensing that this is not right, that this is not true.
Yeah.
But I was just like, wow, he has like never encountered any narrative that contradicts whatever his like supervisors or the people like doing his training are telling him, and it's leading him to have this like really dehumanized view of people who experience madness, or people who are psychiatrically incarcerated, or all of this stuff, like people who are labeled as being mentally ill, and making it, and then because he has this view of who this happens to, it's in turn making him have this view of like, this is what helps, when it's actually like really, really harmful.
It's also extremely ironic, because that's what the mental health hospitalization process does. It puts all these people in distress in the same place, which itself has been critiqued. Why are you bringing people out of their natural context, and what else but then you put them in the same place, and then you police them to not. And that's definitely resonates with what some of my hospital experiences have been. It makes me think, Cassie, we need a whole counterintelligence unit for the psychiatric survivor movements, because we need more secret agents going out and just asking, oh, psychiatric hospital, what's that, and getting this stuff on tape, because this is so outrageous that this is really what's going on, because it is what's going on behind the scenes, but people don't believe that that's actually, it's this extreme, that people would rationalize something as absurd and dehumanizing with a throwaway, oh, it's counterintuitive, but that's what helps, because basically they've been trained by experts
Yeah.
to just short circuit their humanity and to just jump in with this completely normalized violence that's part of the institutional culture that they're part of. So I think we need to get some more secret agents out there.
Yeah, I agree. I also just think there's so much of it's counterintuitive, but it helps, right? Like, oh, it's counterintuitive to lock someone up against their will, but trust me, it helps. It's counterintuitive to take away somebody's clothes and their possessions, but trust me, it helps. It's counterintuitive to limit how often they can call their friends and family or see people outside the hospital, but trust me, it helps. Like, so many layers of just dehumanization and making ridiculous decisions and policies on behalf of people who supposedly don't have enough insight to make their own decisions, you know?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't really believe this. My heart says this isn't right, but I'm going to do it anyway.
But the person with the degree like said that this is what we're supposed to do. Yeah, and I feel like, because I was like, oh man, like this is so sinister, because I feel like what it really reminded me of is I feel like the upholding of these systems kind of depend on the people who are in the positions of power not talking to the people who are experiencing this in a like humanized peer-to-peer way, because then that would force them to be like, oh wait, like maybe this is actually really weird that we're doing this. And it's also like all the things that like you were listing off of, like, yeah, it's counterintuitive to take away people's clothes and like all of this stuff. Like I feel like if it's happening like anywhere else, everyone would be like, that's horrible, like that's so obviously traumatizing. But because it happens under the notion of care, and because there's something wrong with you, then it's like okay to do, which is like, I don't know, like I feel like it's so interesting too, of like kind of like what even like the power of like talking to people is like does like in that like setting. Like so I was like really mad. So it's interesting because it's like in this hospitalization compared to like, for example, like this other hospitalization during my freshman year of college, like this time I was really mad about it because I was like, I know how this works now and this isn't right. Versus like previously I had been like, oh man, there's like something wrong with me and that's why I'm like here. And kind of like, and I think that is like really crucial, is like to kind of like shift from being like, what is wrong with me, to what is wrong with all of this. And I think in the same sense of how the system counts on people not talking to each other in that way, it counts on you being too ashamed to talk to each other. It really like instills the shame in you, and like makes you feel like, oh, like there is something wrong with me, which is also like really like cruelly ironic if you think about things like suicidality and like why people might feel like they shouldn't live. And then it's like, okay, the experience of hospitalization might legitimize a lot of those feelings too, like being like, oh yeah, like we can completely take you away from your life and no one's gonna notice and it's completely fine. Like it like makes you feel like a completely extraneous person, and it also like makes you feel like you can't be in control of your own life because they've taken away all of the control. They've been like, you can't like all of this messaging that is just going to like exacerbate a lot of these things that people are doing. And it's like, why would you do that? And then like, but I was like really mad. So I was like at one point this one like psychiatrist was like, have you considered that you have borderline personality disorder? And I was like, have you considered that this is medical misogyny that you're saying that to me? And like, I'm mad about that. But I also think it was like medical misogyny. And then I was like, no, I don't have borderline personality disorder. I'm experiencing autistic burnout. But because of like medical misogyny, you are like, it's very common. Like, because I've been like previously gotten really interested. I had a previous like therapist who was really bad, who kept like saying that I had borderline personality disorder and that I needed to read these books on borderline personality disorder to get to know myself. And that if I didn't read them, that she was going to institutionalize me, which is really stressful.
What?
Yeah.
What? That's ludicrous.
But because she like kept suggesting this, and I was like, no, I really don't think I have borderline personality disorder. I also feel like it's kind of like, I personally find it to be like a sus diagnostic category.
Yeah.
So I had like started doing like a bunch of research on it, and then I was like, oh, like why are like 75% of the people diagnosed with this feminine presenting, like why, like, and then like all of the things that it listed, I was like, there are like very clear like other explanations for why someone would be like feeling all of those things. And I feel like it's also like,
why did it used to be called hysteria, and why did they
yeah,
change it from
exactly. I would say,
hysteria to borderline? What's going on there?
yeah, I take issue with diagnostic categories in general, but that one
Yeah.
specifically, I'm like,
Yeah.
I really take issue with that one. So I had like also immediately prior to this hospitalization, I'd been like reading a lot about like basically like looking into, I was like, what is the like kind of genealogy of borderline personality disorder? Like it's like kind of weird to them. This like psychiatrist said that to me, and I was like, no, and here's why. And then also like throughout it, I also think this is messed up. There were all these like medical students who were like shadowing and like coming in, and I was like, this feels like very exploitative and like very specific. And I was also really stressed. I was like, what if someone I know is one of these students? Well, I wonder what that would have been like too, because it's like what that would have been. That's also in my writing of the article and giving it to the school newspaper. I was like, because I was like, I want people to think like it's like these are my classmates, this is my TA, like stuff like that. But I was really stressed because I was like, I know a lot of pre-med students. Like, what if one of them is like shadowing and then comes and sees me here where I like don't have my own clothes and I haven't been allowed to like brush my teeth or shower for like days, and I am in this like horribly distressing circumstance. But I would like I would see all the medical students and I would like talk to them, and I would be like, so do you think what is happening here is okay? And I would be like, why do you think? So I was just like, I don't know, like I don't expect like people who are like quote unquote like patients like talk to them in that way, but I was like trying to like, I don't know, I was like, maybe I could politicize like the medical students in this process. I was like, they're here like observing me, which is weird.
Yeah, I remember when I was locked up and I went in and I had it was like for a physical something, and they were interviewing me, and the person who was there said, oh well, we have a couple of medical students that are coming in and they're learning, is it okay if they come in? And I said okay, and they were shadowing, and like 16 people came into the room.
Gosh,
I was like,
what?
It was like 16 people. I couldn't, and they're all just like very earnestly staring at me, and I was like, yeah, that makes me feel supported and like I want to build trust with this institution. And
that brings me to something I wanted to ask. Something that I found interesting in your article when I read it was just the question of consent. Like, what does it mean to have truly informed consent inside of these settings? You know, like I hear you, Will, talking about, yeah, technically you gave your consent, but you had no idea you were consenting to 16 people, right? Yeah. And in your article, there was the part where they were trying to get you to voluntarily sign yourself into the psychiatric unit, right? Because then whatever. And I'm just curious your thoughts about the nebulousness of what consent means in these contexts.
Yeah, I think that like, well, in this hospitalization, because I feel like I asked about a lot more stuff than I had in previous times, because like I guess like in the previous times like I had like not thought to ask, or I don't know, like I feel like it's like they make it very confusing. Like they don't realize, like it's hard to realize when you're making like a quote unquote choice or like something like broadly, but yeah, so like in this hospitalization I had so just to summarize it, like the police had come to my apartment, they had handcuffed me. This was on Saturday morning.
Do you want to tell the story from the very beginning, like because you said you were in a crisis, so what do you mean? And you contacted them, or what were you going through?
So basically what happened was I had been I had just started a position as a research assistant in a neuroscience lab, and I found that lab in particular really triggering for a lot of reasons, like both like but the like nature of like the research itself. It was kind of interesting too, because I was like the way that you don't realize the way the research is done, but also like I found the facilities really reminiscent of my previous experience in a psychiatric ward. Like it was like just like in terms of like the concrete and the way that like the doors were, and like seeing people like in scrubs and like all of like the stuff. Like I just like I just like started like having like flashbacks, and I was like so distraught, and I was like I can't work in this lab, but I had like a grant to like work in that lab for like the summer. So I like actually on like Friday night I had been like one email, I was like, can I like, is there some way like I can stop to like pay back the grant or like something like that? And I had also been googling like psychiatric survivors in STEM, and I couldn't find anything like online, because I was just like looking for like advice on anything, because I was like I felt like very acutely like I can't work in this environment because I'm a psychiatric survivor. So I was like looking at,
You say it was a neuroscience lab. Are they looking at rats' brains? Are they doing like behavioral interviews, or what are they doing?
this was it was an animal lab. But like how it kind of works here is like all the there's like a building that's like also like connected to the hospital, which was also unfortunately not. So I ended up did switching to a different lab after the hospitalization, but it was in the hospital. So I had to walk through one of the exact same corridors that I had been brought through when I was detained every day of the summer, and I was like, this is horrible. And then I also like intensified my feeling of like a secret agent complex. This really like acute feeling of like, what is different? Like I'm in the same place. My mental health is even worse. But now I'm allowed to have my clothes and my phone, and I'm allowed to drink water whenever I want and stuff. But yeah, it was an animal lab, and the animals are all in this like kind of like in the basement of the building is where like all the animals are housed, and then like
always the basement, isn't it? Always the basement. They always put it
yeah. And then you like bring them up to like the lab and stuff. Animal work is not for me. Quickly learned for many reasons, but also like I was just like I was so distraught.
You were getting triggered and you were distraught and you wanted to change and get out of there.
Yeah. So and then I also like I couldn't like, and then I also just like identified really strongly with like the animals that were being done research on. Like I don't know, but like I kept like seeing myself as like having like this weird feeling of like seeing myself as the animal, and like I would be like, oh, like, and I don't know if that comes from like my experiences of being like specimized or like I don't know what it was, but I just like kept seeing myself as
specimized. That's one I have not, that's a term I have not heard. I love that term. I hate it obviously, but it's a powerful term. Specimen, turned into a specimen.
Yeah, I talk a lot about specimization, like particularly too, because I like find that like sometimes when I like will like reveal like one of my like identities and stuff, sometimes people like ask me like really like intrusive questions, and I'm like, man, like I am not like your specimen.
Right,
I'm a real human being. Like
right.
Or like even like sometimes like like people who have these like so like these specimizing view of pathologized people. But so I don't know if I was like feeling like I don't know if I was like identifying males because of like my experience with like specimization or like anything, but like seeing them like handled, I was like, oh, like this is like how I have been handled like by people in like psychiatric context, or like things like that. Like, but it was just basically like it was so distressing, and I also like couldn't find anything online if I searched like psychiatric survivors in STEM, and I was like, no.
Oh, psychiatric survivors in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
Okay, someone out there, start a website, get that going.
There's also like this is something I'd also been really struggling with like in the past year. So like, well, like over like my second year, because that's when I started taking like neuroscience courses, and I like had this like feeling of like, will I ever be seen as like a real scientist, or will I only be seen as like a specimen? And then like, so I was just like, how do people like cope with like working in these settings if they have had these really traumatic experiences like there, but then also feel like they can't say anything because don't want to like invoke the specimizing gaze like onto themselves in the setting of like when they're like trying to do like their work.
You didn't have any advisors or any professors you were working with who you could talk to and kind of get some support from? Or
yes, like I did, but I didn't feel like I could ask. I ended up actually on the first night, like on the Saturday night, I was able to call the like head of my like program, like my grant, and she was like, yeah, like we can absolutely like switch you labs. And I was like, oh great, like I don't have to go back. So like everything that caused me like distress had been resolved by Saturday night, but then I still had to stay there until Thursday night. But so like I actually did, but I just like didn't realize I could, or like didn't, or like maybe I just like felt like ashamed to be like, I feel like I don't know, like I was worried like, am I gonna have to explain like why it's triggering, like what is gonna happen if I have to do that? Like I didn't feel like I could, like it's like even if I like, I guess I technically did, but I didn't realize I did or didn't feel like I did. But anyways, so I was like in this like huge amount of distress, and I like called student counseling, and I was like, I I need to pay back my grant. I need to like drop out of like the school. Like I can't go back to the lab. It makes me feel like I need to die. Like all of this. It was like a 40-minute call too. Well, it was like 40 minutes before the police arrived. But like and I feel like I was like eventually like because I called student counseling in part because I was like maybe they'll know if I can pay back the grant. But I was just really distressed about like the grant. And then I hear this like banging on the door and it's like super loud. And I was like, oh man, like what is that?
You literally called the counseling center at school. You just told them that you were really upset about the situation you're in the grant and all this. And then while you're on the phone to the counseling center, they had called the police without telling you. And then you get this knock on the door.
Yes. Well, and also I explicitly said it's really triggering of this time that I was in a psych ward. And then look where I ended up. Back in a psych ward.
Did you say you were going to kill yourself, or I have a gun, or I'm going to burn down the dorm, or something like that? Or
I might have said something that like I was like maybe once I drop out of school I can kill myself because I like definitely didn't say anything about killing myself soon. So the police come to the door and there's so many of them too. Like so it's like sort of they all like come into like my apartment. And I also like wasn't dressed because I called like first thing when I like woke up. So I wasn't like fully dressed or like anything. They took the phone with the counselor too, so I don't really know what like the counselor like said to them. And so another police officer comes up and like is like stand up, turn around, and handcuffs me. They didn't like ask me to come with them or anything. They just like went also straight to like handcuffing me.
Wow.
So I get like taken down to like the squad car. They're like, we'll put you in the car with the female officer, which also like I feel like. It was all men who had like come like into my apartment. It was all men who had made like physical like handling of me or anything like that. So I thought that was weird to be like, yes, we care about like the gender dynamics of
the afterthought.
Is. Yeah, like I feel like it's weird to mention it there. Like just like don't mention it at all. Clearly, like you don't care.
It's also just so intense that I mean, like when I think about them coming into your apartment and handcuffing you and leading you to the car, it's like, is it illegal to have a mental health crisis? Like, is it criminal to have a mental health crisis? Do you need to handcuff someone because they like told a school crisis counselor they're feeling suicidal? Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I also like, they didn't ask me to come with them before handcuffing me. I wasn't like,
you weren't like resisting
or anything. Yeah. And then also like, I don't know. It was really weird. I think I like asked like what was like where they were taking me, and I think they said that they were taking me like to be evaluated. Oh, then they said they would take me to be evaluated and then they would bring me right back. They did tell me that they would bring me right back, which was a lie. The police always lie. Oh, another thing, I was also coding. I was also trying to code because in the same neuroscience lab, my like grad student supervisor would give me this really, really hard coding assignment. So I think I also said additionally I was stressed because I was trying to learn how to code in MATLAB and I was like not succeeding. And I think that like I was telling my friend about this because sometimes I refer to the whole thing as the MATLAB incident because I don't know, I think it's funny. I think it's
the MATLAB, like MAT.
It's a coding program, okay. like Python or like okay. C++, like MATLAB is another coding program. And
learning to code was one of your stressors in the whole.
I think it was like at the time I didn't realize it, but then I was telling my friend about it, and I was like, oh, they wanted me to make a raster plot on MATLAB, and they were like, a raster plot is really hard. Like, did anyone help you with that? And they were like, and I was like, no, it was my first time coding, and they were like, maybe that was why you sounded so distressed, is because you were having a hard time coding in MATLAB. But anyway, that's a tangent. But I do think it's funny.
Well, it's part of it because it just says a lot about how just the stresses of being a college student pile up and they add.
Yeah. And so many people end up in crisis when they're in college. Like so many people have their first break. So many people have their first hospitalization. Like college is stressful.
Yeah. And I also think that like, I don't know. I feel like my university is known for being really stressful and really toxic. Like it's the like nickname is like where fun comes to die. And
oh wow,
that's the nickname of the University of Chicago, where fun.
Literally, if you Google where fun comes to die, like the first result is like the University of Chicago.
I think that's a wellness issue. What do you think, Jax? I think that's a wellness issue. Yeah.
And or like even I was talking to one of my professors and they were like, yeah, the university like prides itself on crushing its students. And I feel like there's
Oh
like
my
a huge
God.
like
Oh my God.
you know, like how people talk about like publish or perish culture. I feel like that's really prevalent here. Even like perform well academically or perish. Like I think it's hugely like it hugely distorts like what's important. And then I also think that like in a lot of ways, I think that I was thinking about this. I was talking to someone about I was in office hours this morning. I was talking about how I think like at a like quote unquote like elite university, when most people have been like told their whole life, like you are special because you are intelligent, like that instills a very like hierarchical view of how people have values centering around conventional measures of how body, minds, and brains should be, and how that will manifest in a lot of ableism and a lot of saneism. And also thinking particularly about neuroscience, like if we go into like say, okay, like we're going to study the brain, and combining that with when you have like been in this like culture like your whole life and being told like that this is what matters, this is how you have value, like what kind of effect that's gonna have.
Absolutely. So they handcuff you and then they
Mm-hmm.
bring you, did they bring you to
The
hospital, or
ER.
where do they take, they brought to put you in the police
Yeah, so they
car?
brought me in a police car to the ER. And I was also really stressed. I don't know why I was so worried like someone's gonna see me. I was
Yeah.
really worried about it, but also like I think it is a thing like of like what if one of my peers sees me like handcuffed in like a
Of
squad
course.
car?
Of
Like
course. It's
um
horrifying.
not like I don't know. Like of course like now I'm like, oh well everyone knows now because I voluntarily put out this like article about it. But like that's a completely different thing. That was me being like that was me choosing to put something out versus then
Right.
like also back to the consent question. So I get brought to the ER. And I'm like there for like a few hours and they wouldn't give me any like water or toilet paper or like I don't know. Like it was like there was like kind of like a desk and then there were like a couple like three or four like rooms. I was in like one of the rooms on like a gurney and they take like the like I didn't have very many clothes on. Like I was basically like when the police came in I was just in like a shirt. And I had like when the police came in I'd had like some pajama pants on my floor or something which I had like put on. But I didn't have very much clothing, but they took all that and gave me like a hospital gown, which I didn't like the texture of. I'm sensitive to textures. But like I think that's also a thing too that it's like I don't know. I don't like being in a hospital gown. And I
Yeah.
also expressed things like I said that I was like that I felt like really distressed, like not having my own clothes, both in terms of direct sensory processing, but also in terms of like I previously experienced like sexual assault. I like don't like this like hospital gown. I don't like being touched. I like all of like this stuff that would be like reasons to be very distressed. But I ended up being like in the basically like in the like ER room and then I eventually came and talked to a psychiatrist and then I like told the psychiatrist that like I was like it's fine. I was just like worried about like this grade and everything, but basically they didn't regard like care about anything that I said at that point because they were like, you said this on the phone with the counselor, so we are going to hospitalize you. And I was like, no. So I feel like I'm telling this in like a much more lighthearted way than how it actually happened,
Yeah, of course.
or how I wrote about it. But that was like I feel like that was like horrible because I had explicitly said I was having flashbacks to when I was on a psych ward. Like this is like the worst thing that like you can do for me. And they like didn't care at all. And then like I also like had like experienced like assault while in a psych ward and I like didn't want that to happen again. I didn't want to be like taken away from my life. Like I didn't want to not have clothes or underwear or access to food and water. Like I very reasonably did not want to be hospitalized. And I also said that like I don't know, I like using their like terms of like support network and treatment plan and like there I was like, no, like I can do all these things. Da, 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 da. I think for the most part, once I was detained, I said like all the right things, but they were like, no, this is what the counselor on the phone said. So I ended up being in like the ER room. So I get there on Saturday morning. I ended up being there. Oh, I eventually did get water, but that was because they sedated me. So I like to lie on the floor in general. I'm a big floor enjoyer. But like I was so upset when they were like, we're gonna hospitalize you no matter what. So I was like crying on the floor because it was like also like the tile was cold. It felt nice, and it's also like what how do you expect someone to react when you like tell someone about that? And then they were like, if you keep acting like this, we're gonna have to sedate you. Will you take oral sedatives, or are we gonna have to inject you? And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll take the oral ones. I don't really want to be injected with the sedatives. But like that's again like the question of consent. Like that's not a real choice. Like that's like I'm saying like you're gonna get sedated either way. But so then I guess like I voluntarily took the oral sedatives so that I wouldn't like, because it's like it's like I would have been injected through sedatives, but then I'm like, I don't know what they would have done in order to inject me. Like, would they have held me down? Would they have physically restrained me in order to chemically restrain me? Or like I don't know. So I just like didn't really want to like risk that because I was like, yeah, I guess I'll take. And I was also really thirsty because they wouldn't give me water. So I was like, maybe if I agree to take the oral sedatives, they'll give me water to take the sedatives.
Good Lord, what an ordeal.
Yeah, it was like and there was also really loud, and again I like sensory processing issues. It was like a really like just like bad environment to be in. So I eventually like I guess they were waiting for like a bed to open up on one specific ward because they said that then there would be like cohesiveness between like the teams of like people there. Which I feel like didn't turn out to be super true. But that's why they were like, that's how they're just like holding me in like the ER at the same time. I also maybe because it was like a weekend, because I think in general people don't get discharged on the weekends because they know for like the 72 hours like weekends don't count, which I think is really really weird.
What? I didn't know that weekends don't count towards a 72-hour hold.
Yeah, only business days count towards your hold. What? It's like, yeah, no, so like if it like I was thinking about this because later on when I eventually did get to the ward on Monday, and the Jax, what you had mentioned about the time when they were asking me to sign in, it said something about like I think like it's after like 5 days you can request discharge, but weekends don't count, or it said like weekdays only, or weekends and holidays excluded. And I was like, that's really weird. You're still gonna be there.
Right, that's still your life. Like whiling away in the psych ward.
Yeah, and it's like it really, I feel like it doesn't really matter to you if it's a weekend or a holiday. And also you still get like charged for weekends and holidays that you're there, but yeah. I don't know. I just think that's really weird. I think it's really weird that weekends and holidays don't count.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was also a component of it being the weekend that they weren't able to transfer me for so long, but
so you're in the ER and then they're going to transfer you, and then they do this thing about voluntary, involuntary. Is that what happened?
Yeah, so I'm in the ER Saturday, Sunday, and then really late Sunday night, I get moved to a different room within the same hospital that's like on my college campus. And then I like am there for like pretty much all of Monday until like Monday night. And they were like, well, okay, we're going to transfer you. And I was like, don't do it in an ambulance. It's too expensive. And they transferred me in an ambulance anyway. Because I was like, I know this whole...
You get a bill at the end of this, right?
Oh, yeah. Not just for the ambulance, but for everything. Like in total, like it ends up costing like thousands of dollars. Like, yeah, you get billed for all of the like lab work they do on you, like because they also kept taking my blood. Like I feel like they took my blood at least like 4 times in the 6 days. Like I don't know why they needed to take it so much. But like then you get charged for all of the tests that they run on your blood. It turns out I was vitamin B deficient, which will come up later when this nurse like gave me a vitamin B shot, but didn't like ask me or tell me what it was. And it turned out to be vitamin B because the blood test showed that I was vitamin B deficient. But I feel like still giving me a shot without asking me or telling me what it was not cool. But yeah, that you get charged for all of the like lab work and like blood work that they do. You get charged for like, I don't know if they call it room and board, but you get charged basically for like the bed or like whatever. You get charged for the transportation. You get charged for everything. And also like, the bills keep coming. Like I don't know, like it's like it happened in like June, and then like the end of summer I got like one bill, and then I got another bill in the fall, and then I got another bill in December, and I was like, no, because also like it would I would be like, man, now and then also like one time they like called me about one of the bills, and they were like, do you remember the treatment you received from like, and I was like, yeah, I remember. It wasn't treatment. But like, I don't know. Like, I think that's so like offensive to be like, do you remember when you like essentially got kidnapped by the police and then held for 6 days? Like, I don't know. Yeah, the billing is.
Then we sent you a bill for it.
Oh yeah, several bills.
Yeah. So you're in the ER. They're transferring you. They got you in a different room, and then
so I'm in a different room, and then I get transferred to a different location, which actually has like, I guess like the psychiatric facility. I don't know if there's a psychiatric facility at the first hospital or not, but like the so I like get there, and they do like the like, you know, like that like examination where you have to like take off all your clothes and like so, like look over. I think it's to check if for like abrasions maybe. I don't know, because I know like no, okay, not during this hospitalization, but during my hospitalization during my freshman year, we had to be physically examined every day. Like every day we'd have to come in and take off all our clothes. And they would like examine for, I guess like for if there's more like signs that like you're harming yourself or anything, I guess.
Wow. That's so messed up.
So at this place at the summer after my second year, which is the story I've been telling, I didn't have to do that every day, but I did initially. Oh, I forgot too. When I was in the first room, so there's the ER, then there's the other room. When I was in the other room, they let me shower, but they wouldn't let me hold the soap myself. Like there was like this like nurse's aide like watching me the whole time. And was like you could shower. And also they also put like an IV needle in my arm, but never connected it to anything. For like 2 days, like they just had like this needle there, but then they never connected it to an IV. And they're like, we need this here just in case. And then they ended up not doing anything with it, but it really hurt. And then it was like really hard to like move around because I had this like needle like in my arm and stuff. And then they never connected it to anything. And I was like, this is like, what? So I was like trying to shower, and it's kind of hard because I have this like huge like IV needle like in my arm that's not connected to anything. And then also I have this nurse just like staring at me the entire time, and then I have to like occasionally like reach out and like ask her for like a pump of soap. And I like asked her, like, I was like, why can't I hold the soap myself? And they're like, we don't know what you're gonna do with it. And I was like, what am I gonna do with a bottle of soap? And they're like, you could try to eat the pump, you could do all sorts, you could drink it. And they're like, when you're in here for what you're in for, we just can't take any risks. And I was like, what am I in here for?
It's counterintuitive, but we're gonna do it anyway.
It's counterintuitive, but this is what helps. No, she didn't. And I asked, what am I in here for? And she didn't know. But it was just like by virtue of the fact that I was there, like she assumed that it's very like circular thinking, like circular thinking. Like because they're there here, they must need to be here. And because they need to be here, that's why they're here.
Yeah, it's a whole closed loop of dehumanization, rationalization. So and because Jax had asked about the consent piece, but what happened with the voluntary admission? Was there something that happened there?
Oh yeah, I was getting to that. So I am on Tuesday morning, they're like, oh, you need to meet with, I forget someone who has like this paperwork, and they're like, okay, like, do you want to sign involuntary? And I was like, aren't I already like here involuntarily? And they're like, no, you're under certain petition. And I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? Does that mean I can leave since I'm like not signed in? And they were like, oh no, like you can't leave. And I was like, okay, like, do I have any like rights? And they gave me like this paper, and I was reading it, and I was like, okay, well, this makes it seem like I can like request discharge. So can I request discharge? And they're like, oh no, that's actually like very misleading. And then they took away the paper, so I couldn't read the rest of what my so-called rights were. And they were like, you should sign in voluntary because it looks a lot better, and it like shows that you're like willing to work and like willing to like try, and you should do. And then it's like, if you don't sign in like voluntary,
you should plead guilty, because then we're going to go easier on you. It's the same kind of thing.
Kind of, but then also like it's like you're gonna be, it's like basically if you don't sign involuntary, then you're gonna get signed in involuntary. So yeah, exactly. Like I guess it is like, it's like, again, not a real choice. And then I was also like, so does the time I was not in the ER also like not count towards this? And they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't count. And I'm not sure if it doesn't count because it was a different location or because it was the weekend, because weekend and holidays don't count. Which, yeah. So then I was like there, and it sucked because, well, it was also like, it was really boring. Like it was like, there was like nothing to do. Like you couldn't go outside. You couldn't, oh, like I guess like you could shower now, but like the night I arrived, the water was like out for some reason. I don't know, that was just like a coincidence that there happened to be no water. But like you have like your like meal times, and then like in between you like, I don't know, like you might meet with like a social worker or psychiatrist, but like not very like frequently. And then like whatever I did, it was like always like kind of just like back to square one. Like it was like, oh, like on Saturday on the call, like you said this. And then like also to reiterate, like earlier, all of my problems had been resolved by Saturday night. Like I had been like, they'd been like, oh yeah, like you never have to return to that lab again. And it was like, sweet.
They were not listening at all.
Yeah.
You had a very specific problem. I'm stuck with a grant in a lab that's triggering me. Now it's solved. And now if I did feel, even was having suicidal feelings, which wasn't the main issue at all, that the reason for them is no longer there. There's zero listening to your experience. It's all just processing you based on what they're essentially imagining you are based on their own assumptions.
And it's just like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it was so like, it was so frustrating too, because I feel like there was no like, they never even like talked to like the previous person or like whatever. And it was like, there was like inconsistent like phone access. Like there was like a schedule of like when there's phone hours. It didn't actually correspond to that.
You weren't able to keep your cell phone?
No. They say that it's for privacy, to make sure you're not like filming.
They've said that before, but they could tape the cameras. They
that
could
is
figure out a way
such
around.
bullshit.
Yeah, it's totally.
Yeah. But no, not allowed to keep like cell phone or like anything.
I mean, there's been research about that. When you're separated, and people know this, if you're separated from your cell phone, it causes anxiety. How is that supposed to be helpful?
Well, and it's also like just also like the social isolation from it. Like it's like exactly. If you feel like no one notices that like you're gone or anything, like how is that going to like make you feel? Or also like, I don't know, I'm like, I don't have any pets, but if I had like a cat or a dog, I would be really stressed about my like cat and dog, and I would be like, oh man, like how long am I gonna be there? Is my pet gonna die? I don't know. Like I feel like there's this like all these like logistical things that like don't make sense. Whenever they would like ask me, like whenever like someone would meet with me, they would be like, oh, like how are you feeling? And I would be like, I think that's a really unfair question. Like, how do you expect me to be feeling when you have like, when I like specifically said that like this is the exact place I don't want to be, and you have taken away my clothes, I don't have any underwear, I how do you expect me to be? It's such like an unfair question, but you also have to be like, oh, I'm doing well, because you want to get discharged. And it's like, it's so like, it just makes it doesn't make any sense to do, but it's like you're forcing people into this like really like terrible situation.
Yeah, it's bringing back a lot of memories of my own experience. I'm just so glad you got out. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. Is very dangerous. And what you had going for you is your clarity and your strength. You never started doubting yourself. You stayed really strong and clear, and you made it out. Whereas a lot of people they start to believe what they're told, and then they start to spiral down, and then you're drugged and your thinking is clouded, and then pretty soon you start down the path, which you have not done. You start down the path of kind of becoming an ongoing psychiatric patient even when you get out, and then your life can take a really, really dark turn. So that's what I think is the most remarkable thing about your story for me, is that you're 100% clear, and you're holding on to your truth the whole time from the very beginning. You know exactly what's going on, and you're calling it out, which of course causes problems for you, but eventually you're like, okay, now I got to play the game to get out of here.
Yeah. And I think that's like, I don't know, like I don't know if I would have been able to navigate that situation in that way if I had not started like reading more or like learning more about like the
You were really
critiques.
prepared. You were very prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I had not like started like engaging in this stuff, and also like I had like a long like psychiatric history. The first time I was like prescribed medication was when I was 8 years old. I ended up getting taken off that one pretty quickly, but then I got put on medication again when I was 16, and was put on medication like very consistently.
Like antidepressants, or what kind of?
Yeah, well, like antidepressants, or
Maybe.
stimulants, antipsychotic, like all sorts of different things, partially because nothing worked well. So then I would just, but then it's like whatever, something doesn't work well, they're like, oh, I guess you just need more.
It helps.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive that if this medication is having you have a bad experience, it's actually because we haven't given you enough of it. But like, yeah, because I had like I was on, I don't know, I would say that like psychiatric medications have been not hugely life ruining, but definitely like had like mildly life ruining, I guess, for me, because I would say that because I know that there's hugely negative effects that it can have. I would say like for me, my experience was not like as bad as like what happens for some people, but it was not good, and it was like I kept getting prescribed like different medication. They're like, okay, like if this doesn't work, we're gonna try this. Oh, we're gonna give you a like cheek swab, and it's gonna genetically tell you like what medications are gonna work, and like they never really worked. Or so I was like, it would be like, oh, okay, like I'll feel better for like 3 weeks, but then I'll start feeling like really bad. And like all this stuff of like having like a very long like psychiatric history.
Yeah.
And then also like of kind of like the like transformations that I made in like the prior year of both, as I started to like learn more about neuroscience and actually be like, oh, like actually scientifically some of the things that my previous like psychiatrists have told me is impossible to be true, or like things that they like told me about like what like a medication was like, being in like learning more about like actually what the state of the field of neuroscience is, and being like, oh, like there is no way that they could have known that, or they're like, or like different things like that. And then also reading more about disability justice, and learning more about like what it means to be pathologized, like in a political sense, and also like learning about like and really thinking about it in the context of the carceral logics, and the way that the logics of the prison industrial complex like extend to these like domains and stuff, and being, and like all of that stuff really making a difference, and being able to see that circumstance as like something bad is happening to me. It is not that I have done something wrong. And then I think also too, like, because I had like viewed it in that way and like stuff like that, I feel like it also made it easier for me to like I guess like call or like tell people about like what was happening. So then that I guess also helped with like combating isolation and shame, in contrast to like a previous hospitalization.
Most people, I think the vast majority of people that go in are not going to be standing up for what they know is true. They're not going to be seeing what's happening. They're not saying they're not going to be able to answer, how do you think I feel? This is what you are doing to me. That's a crazy question. But there's something in you, because was it primarily because you had learned so much critique of psychiatry, or is it something in your personality or the way that you are in life? Have you always been like a really strong kind of holding on to your truth kind of person, or?
I don't know. Well, I also do think it's significant that that was not my first hospitalization as well, because I would say that like more in terms of like for example, like when I was like the hospitalization during my freshman year, I'd say I was more like kind of like going along with like, oh, like there's like something wrong with me, and like not like telling anyone or like really like thinking about it in that way. But like,
how many years before was your first hospitalization? So it's almost like an educational.
I've only been like held hospitalized twice, both times were in college. First time was during my freshman year in March of 2020, which is a very interesting time to be in mental hospital.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was really scary too, because like lack of information too about like what was happening like broadly in the world was really scary in that sense.
Man, what an ordeal, Cassie. I am so sorry that you went through that. Ugh.
It was not good.
Hospitalization is so traumatic.
And then it's also just like so cruelly ironic of being like, we're like here to that like it's like we're helping you.
Right? I know you go in there looking for like sanctuary and cure, you know, or they come to you saying, we're going to help you get better because you're in this dangerous place. And then instead they just enact violence upon you.
Yeah, and I kind of like even say like my closing paragraph of the article that I wrote kind of says like, to my understanding, nothing that happened to me was illegal, and no individual outrageously failed to perform their assigned role in the psychiatric system. I don't think what happened to me was unusual in Chicago psychiatric institutions, and such failures are replicated across our country. Because of my prior experience with the psychiatric system, my interest in how it functions, and my perspective as a neuroscience student and researcher, I was somewhat able to brace myself with the trauma of being held against my will. But I know that to many people, my story will come as a surprise. My hope is that this account raises questions to our community about how we talk about and treat survivors of psychiatric trauma, because nobody should be dehumanized in the very place they seek care, and no one should be dismissed because their experience does not match the public narrative.
Nice.
This is normal standard treatment that you went, nothing illegal, nothing against, they followed protocol. Yeah, I really encourage people to read your essay. Very powerful.
I'm really glad to be like talking with both of you. I like Jackson, I'm also very excited to meet you, because like I think like the work of the Icarus Project and Fireweeds Collective is incredible. So I'm like very honored.
Oh, thanks.
Are you interested in having people be able to contact you if they want to?
I would love that, especially because while I don't feel like shame about what happened to me this time, like I definitely did in the past, and I know that other people who are hospitalized, like I feel like are definitely like feeling confined by shame. So that, like I feel like that was another. So I feel like there was like two reasons I was writing. One is for disrupting the conception of people who don't know that this happens, and then the other is like for people that experience it, that are like feeling like isolation, or like that they can't like talk about it because there's no conversation, or feeling like they're the only one that this happens to because there's something wrong with them, or like anything like that.
So how can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch?
You can email me. My email is let's see, a good email for this would be CassidyW312@gmail.com. But yeah, no, I would love for people to contact me. Like, well, that was like what kind of like what was exciting is like some like if like people like did like reach out and be like, oh, like I experiencing something similar, or like this made me think differently.
Will's going to wrap us up now with the bio again for Cassidy.
I will do that. Thank you, Cassidy, for joining us. You've been listening to an interview with Cassidy Wilson. Cassidy is a psychiatric survivor and undergraduate student at the University of Chicago with a double major in neuroscience and human rights. Her area of focus is on neuroscience and carcerality. Cassidy is the author of At the Forefront of Medicine, My Summer Involuntary Hospitalization, which is an account of their experience that can be found online and is linked on the Madness Radio website. And that's all the time we have on Madness Radio. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hey everyone, just a quick announcement. We are very excited to be organizing Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023. Summer camp for mad people in the mountains of Northern California. Join us, support this vision. Check out madcamp.net and make sure to sign up for the mailing list for updates. Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023, madcamp.net. What does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health.